I'm Jason Sparks, and I'm going to share with you my 3 basic steps to fly tying. Hopefully I can share how to deconstruct fly tying to steps 1, 2, and 3 so that when you look at a fly, in your head you can kind of break down the materials and components that are in it, and you can try to replicate it without having a recipe card. And if you're tying flies off of recipe cards, knowing these 3 steps will make it easier to construct the fly. This isn't about a fly pattern, this is about construction steps on how to properly tie a fly and do it simply. On the vise here I have a purple wet fly. Alright, it's purple thread body with a black and purple guinea hen feather and a little purple head on the front. That's it. Purple thread, purple feather. Step 1. Apply the thread and learn how to manipulate it so that you can control the shape of your fly. That would be the thread body and the thread head. Step 2. Learn how to apply a material. Incorporating a feather into it is the material. That's step 2. Very easy step. And then step 3 is how to secure the fly. That would be the finishing knot. I like to use the whip finish. There's some alternatives. You could put a double square knot in it and a little dab of super glue if you wanted to get really easy about it. And I will say that step 3 is the most important, because if your fly comes apart while you're fishing in the water, you're in trouble, right? So let's go ahead and put a hook in the vise and let me run through these steps pretty quick. I'm going to use some red thread here so it makes it easy to see. Step 1, applying the thread to the hook. I like to tie under towards me and over away from me. Under towards me and over away from me. I'm left-handed, but you can do the same thing if you're right-handed. Under towards you, away, over the top. Alright? So that's just the basic manipulation that your wrist is going to be making. And the way you want to attach the thread is to start spiraling around the hook forward. That's kind of an exaggerated spiral, but I want you to see that it's spiraling forward. And then I go straight over the top, and then I start coming back side by side by side. And then I can let the thread dangle, and it's secure. Alright, so that's what locks the thread to the hook shaft. Winding forward a couple of times, then winding straight over and start winding backwards, and you're all set. So now I'm going to wind my thread back to, a good place to stop is right about the end of the straight part of the shaft, right where the bend comes in. Let's get that tab rolled under there. Didn't even have to snip that off. Build up the fly body some. There we go. Now, notice I came back here at the beginning all the way to the end, but when I'm building up the fly body, I'm going to stop right about there and go forward again. That adds an extra layer there, makes it a little thicker. Now I'm going to come forward, I'm going to stop right about there and make my forward turns. That adds extra layers to the front part of that. And in doing this, it lets you build bulk to the front part of the fly and leave the tail of the fly thinner, a little more natural looking. And you can do it all in the same place, build that body up right in the middle. And then if you want to go all the way to the back again to smooth it out, you can clean up your taper to look that way. Now, one of the things that is easy to see here is that I'm making my turns pretty fast, right? I've got pretty good control over it. What you need to do when you're learning how to tie is to go slow and be deliberate, and learn how to control your thread like this so that it's side by side on your turns. It's not about speed, it's about accuracy. You got to get this part down before you can get fast, right? A lot of people, notice I've only got about an inch and a half of thread out as I'm making my turns. A lot of beginners end up having multiple inches out, 5 or 6, and they don't keep it tight when they're making their turns, and it gets all bound up, and they can't keep it clean. I couldn't keep it clean. I got it all bound up. Did you have that problem? So the trick to that is only having about 1.5 inches or 2 inches out. You see how I got my finger here, kind of keeping tension on it? I've got full control of the tool. Then go nice and slow, and as your hand starts to build that muscle memory for that rotative movement in the wrist, you'll be able to get faster and faster. So that's it. We've built up a nice tapered body on that little red fly. Now let's add a feather to it. That'll be our step 2. So I'm just going to put this speckled hen feather in. I like to tie tip first, so I'm going to take it and pull this back and create like a little notch right there. And then I'm going to lay that right there where my thread is. Okay? And take my thread and wrap it over 1, 2, 3 times. Now the feather is attached. It's in a good place. Right there behind the head of the fly. So a lot of people will snip that tip out. I usually don't. Just going to fold it back and go over it 2 or 3 times. Set my thread there just in front of the feather. And now that the feather is attached, let's go ahead and turn it around the bug body 2 or 3 times. Alright. And then pull it slightly forward, angle it forward here, and take my thread right over the top of that. Alright, so I've attached the material in step 2. I made my turns. I just snipped out the extra. Let's pull this back. Man, that's a good looking bug just like that. I'll teach you guys that pattern another time. But right now we're going to pull all these feather barbs back. Pinching them, and I'm just going to wrap my thread right over it. Give it some turns, and then come forward and wrap to the front of it. Then see if you can kind of wrap over all that and kind of seal it up. And now you have a little red head. That's step 2 complete, using step 1 to control my thread. And now we're going to do step 3, and that's going to be to put a finishing knot on it. I'm going to use the whip finish. There's 4 times once. Set my finish tool up and go 1, 2, 3, 4 times twice. And snip that out. And there we go. Simple fly to tie. So how if we were to do something a little more complex? I hope you guys can back that up and watch that again if you need to see it. But let's get in here and do another one. I'm going to use the same red thread. I'm going to show you how to make a slightly more complicated fly. And what makes it complicated is that you're adding more materials. Now, when I say complicated, I should say complex, meaning not simple 2 or 3 materials, but maybe multiple materials. But that doesn't mean it's complicated. It's just more complex. So let's put a good base layer down. I did all the way to the back and to the front. The main reason I usually coat my whole shaft with thread is because I don't want any material sliding around on that slick metal. I'll put a thread layer down to give it something to bind to. So that's step 1. I attached my thread and I worked it down there, thread control. Now let's do step 2. I'm going to add a material. This part, I'm going to add some yarn. Alright, I like using yarn instead of dubbing. It gives you a lot of the same effect. It's really easy to use. I just laid it on there and lashed it. I can take that front part and fold it back, lash over it again. Now I know that thing folded over like that is going to stick and it's not going to come loose on my fly. Now let's just take that fuzz and fold it back and just start wrapping the yarn around the fly body. Get it to the back, bring it back forward again, right back to where we started. There we go, one more time, and then let's take the thread and just go right over it and use my step 1 thread control to secure the yarn front to back. Alright, so we did step 1 and then we did step 2. Now let's do step 2 again. Let's add another material. So to make a more complex fly with multiple materials, you just repeat step 2. Laid my feather down, wrapped 2 or 3 times. I'm going to fold that tip back, wrap 2 or 3 times, I'm going to work my thread right to the front of that piece. Come around once, twice, 3 times. Then let's secure it in. Snip the bulk of that out. Take my fingers to sweep it back. Alright, notice I didn't get it all, so don't get carried away. Just be careful and gentle, walk through it, pull them all back. Wrap it around, build up that head, secure the feather in place. Alright, let's do step 3, whip finish. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whip and done. That was a single whip. I usually do 2. So I made a more complex fly with thread, yarn body, and a swept back hackle. So the way I took the tip and I folded it back, it almost looks like a single wing there also. There, can you see that? Alright, let's pop this off and see one more. So it's just 3 steps. And then step 2 is the one that gets repeated. Alright, so let's do this again. Red thread. 1, 2, 3 forward, start wrapping backwards. I'm all set. Now let's wrap to the back to get my base layer down, stop right about the bend. Then come back forward again. Alright. Now let's choose, see, I've got some green yarn here. Let's put some little this leprechaun green or rockworm green on there. I'm gonna wrap this on. I'm just rolling it down, right? Spiral down, crisscross it at the tail, and start wrapping back forward. Another thing you might want to do when you're adding yarns is twist in the direction that you're turning, and that'll pull some of the slack out of it. It'll make the yarn denser, which makes it a little stronger. When it holds water, it's going to end up, most yarns sink. This is a wool yarn, so I pulled it through there, wrapped around a couple of times so that I know my yarn is secure. Let's add a hen pheasant feather. You know what? Let's go ahead and add another feather here. Let's see what happens if you tie in 2 feathers at the same time. Let me do that properly. Let me get that out of the way. Get that feather laid in there. Right in the notch. Sweep it back. Take those 2 feathers and just give them 1 or 2 twists. Wrap around once. That'll be enough since I'm doing 2 feathers. Instead of wrapping 2 or 3 times, we'll just wrap once. Let me trim that out. Oh man, that's a good looking fly just like that. But I'm going to sweep it back anyway for you guys. Oh yeah. Alright. Lock it down, build that up. Give it a whip. There we go. So with that fly, step 1, put the thread on it. Step 2, add yarn. Step 2, add a feather. Step 2, add a feather. Step 3, whip. Nice and easy, right? So let's see if we put a different shaped hook in here. I'm going to switch my thread over to this bright green here. I just want to point out this is sewing thread, not special floss. It's just sewing thread from the store. I think this one came from like Joann Fabrics or something. Wrap it back nice and slow. keep my control. Come forward again. Keeping it tight. You don't want to pull it too tight. You pull too tight and you'll break your thread. Alright. Let's take that green yarn again. This is my step 2, add a material. So let's wrap that on. I'm not going to go all the way back. I'm going to leave some of that bright green tail exposed. Alright, lock that down. Let me snip that out of the way. Let me find, just to stay in the greens, here's an olive feather. Got a little too much thread out of my bobbin there. It was hard to control. Put some wraps on that. Wrap around 3 times. There we go. Secure the feather. Trim it out. Slide it back. Lock it down. This I'll leave a little bit of that feather folded over out, exposed up front. It gives me a little dark head, doesn't it? Put this whip on here. Gives me a little bright hot spot color. That's a good looking bug too. 3 easy steps. Step 1, apply your thread and learn how to manipulate and control it. Step 2, add a material. We added yarn. Repeat step 2, add another material. We added a feather. Step 3, whip finish. Not too bad. That's pretty easy. That's pretty much how I tie flies. I come up with a lot of my own patterns, and I did it all by kind of deconstructing the different materials, learning how to break it down to some simple steps, and then figuring out what I wanted my bugs to look like. If you guys are interested, I'll show you how to tie this fly next time. This is my gnarly fly pattern. It's pretty successful. I know how to fish it very well, and it's a confidence fly for me because I've cast it 1,000 times. So back to the 3 basic steps, right? Manipulate your thread, step 1. Add a material, step 2. Repeat step 2 as many times as possible, as many times as needed for the fly that you're creating. And step 3, secure that knot, whip finish or a little head cement, and you're all set. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can add as many materials as you have hook space for, and as you get better with controlling the thread and you get a little deeper into understanding what materials work together, what materials make your fly sink, which materials help your fly float, what size hook should you use, what's your target species, how's the fly going to act in moving water, how's the fly going to act in still water, contrast, the color of the sun, the brightness of the sun, is it overcast, are you fishing in shade? All of those things are going to be things that you should be thinking about when you get into more advanced fly tying for creating your own flies. And if you're following recipe cards, that's a fantastic way to keep going. I hope that my steps 1, 2, and 3 kind of decode the recipe card a little bit so you understand how to get through those portions and how to get from one material to the next material when you're just looking at the ingredients on a card. I appreciate you letting me spend some time with you. I look forward to the next time. Thank you.